Hi, so good morning welcome to the Friday live in the Manage Your Critic from Overwhelm to Clarity in 7 Steps Facebook group. Please, if you're listening to this now on YouTube, please do join us in the group where we have questions and discussions, and anything you've got to do with Manage Your Critic, please bring your questions to the group and I will answer them on a Friday morning if the other group members don't answer it or support you in between. So while we're waiting for a few people to come on, because it's always better for me when we've got actual live people here. So as you come on, please put a comment below, say hi, so I know who's here with me. But I just want to tell you a little bit about my week, what's been going on for me. And actually, I know that the sun's shining on my face here, but last week when I set the phone up in this position, I carefully sort of put the blind across and made sure it wasn't there. But I thought, actually, do you know what? I'm going to leave it there because isn't it great that we've now got a sign that spring's on the way. Getting up in the mornings and it's a bit lighter, although when I left for networking yesterday at 6 o'clock in the morning, it was quite dark. Today, now at 8 o'clock, it's light, and in the evenings it's getting lighter. And I love this time of the year where you start to expand and start to realise there's more hours in the day, even though there was exactly the same amount of hours before, but because it's lighter, I feel there's more opportunity to get things done, like the garden and stuff get cleaned. So someone's just come on live. Please leave a comment so I can see who you are. Thank you for joining me this morning. So what have I been up to this week? Well, I've had a couple of networking groups. I had Women's Business Club on Wednesday, which is the place I go to, if I'm truly honest. It's to tap into my feminine energy, to really give me those resources to stimulate and encourage my feminine leadership skills. And then I had Business Builders on Thursday morning, yesterday morning, where I was actually the speaker. And hi G, thanks for joining me. And that is a place where we have got a lot of men, so I get to be able to sort of tune into and resonate with the male energy in terms of leadership and development and tasks. And I purposefully do that. I make sure that I'm surrounding myself with lots of different people, but it's all about knowing yourself well and knowing what kind of support that you need, and I'm going to talk in a bit more about that today. So hi Kirsty, thanks for joining me. So those of you who've been watching the videos for the last 7 weeks, or actually it's been over 8 weeks because I did miss 1 week, I've now covered the 7 steps to clarity. So the C for curiosity, the L for language, the A for attention, R for reflection, I for intention, T for trust, and Y for you. So they're all up on my YouTube channel. I'll put a link below to get to that if you want to find out more. Please feel free to go and watch them. But today I want to talk a little bit more about confidence. And some questions that I was asked at the Business Builders speaking event yesterday that I think is relevant for everybody. However, you guys at live, G and Kirsty, if you've got any questions, please put them below and I'll also answer those today as well. So the questions I've been asked is, how do you approach it when there might be a response you don't want, i.e. a frying pan or someone tries to kill you? And I think this is a really common problem, that when we're in... So we've got this dialogue going on in our head and we're kind of preempting what someone's going to say, and we've already got ourselves in that they're going to get upset, they're not going to like it. And I think that the first thing is to remember that if you're coming from a place inside that you're almost predicting that they're not going to like it, you're going to be, your whole persona, your tone, your attitude, you probably say it much faster because you're like trying to get it out quickly. And actually the speed that you speak can cause that fight, flight or freeze mechanism from them. So they'll get into the aggressive, they'll get into the defensive, whatever the response is. So if you're not getting the response you want, the first thing to do is to actually make sure that you are resourced. So I'd ask you to think about, what would you like to have happen? And in that case, let me say, if it was me, I'm just going to give an example. What I'd like to have happen is to be able to communicate with this person really well and for them to receive what I've got to say without getting upset. Okay. So then I'd have to think about, how do I need to be in order to communicate in that way? And for me, I'd have to be really, really sure that what I was saying was had good intention, that it really was for the benefit of them, and that I wasn't just criticising them because it bothered me. So, for example, some of the times when I'm working with people, particularly parents, this can happen with, and although I do most of my work with business owners, I think there's a similarity. Well, I don't think there is a similarity, but it's like when you see someone upset, you want to make them feel better, you want them to be happy, but it's not necessarily in that moment because that's what they need to do. It's because you can't handle them being upset. Because actually, if they're going through a grief, or they've gone through some loss, or there's something that's really sad in their life, in that moment, they may well need to be sad, or they may well need to be angry. And actually, what they need and want from you is for you to hold that space and allow them to let that emotion have its time, for it to be heard, for it to be honoured, and for you not to try and change it or make it go away or fix it. So a lot of it can come down to is you actually owning how you need to be, and is your intention for saying what you're going to say to make them feel better or to change something about them, or is it about what you need or want? So the question I'd ask is, how do you need to be? And for me, if I want to be able to communicate something to somebody and I don't want them to get upset, I need to come from a place of love and good intention, and I have to be absolutely sure that what I'm going to say and do is for the benefit of them, and it can be including me, but it's got to be something that's going to be for both of us win-win. So does that make sense? Does that make sense, G and Kirsty? If you can just put something in the comments, that'd be great. And one of the things that I do is that once I've got myself in that state, and I might then think about what kind of support might I need. And if this is an ongoing cycle, so this is a person that you might be a member of your staff or a client, that every time you try and speak to them, you don't get the response you want, then in terms of support, I'd be thinking about what kind of support do I need in order to change the way this communication goes. And it might not happen the first time, but it might be that you have somebody or a process or a support resource. It might be a journal, or you might be videoing or recording or doing something so that you can recognise improvement, because it may not change instantly the whole thing. But if you change your tone, or you slow things down, or you come from a different perspective when you communicate, and you notice for 2 or 3 minutes they are calmer, then pay attention to what it is that you were doing that worked. Because all you can ever do in communication is communicate it and then calibrate for that person. So if I gave you a whole load of questions and a whole load of system and said, right, this is what you need to do step by step, it'd be great if I could give you it like that. But when you do it, you have to have the skills to calibrate in the moment. Is what I'm saying and doing working for this person? So although I have a whole load of questions, I use them, but then I check, is this person responding to those questions? And are they responding to this tone? Are they responding to the speed that I'm talking at? And if not, I adjust it until I find the rhythm that works for that person to be able to communicate with me well. So Gia, you've put, I have to put my phone up, I can't see, my glasses on. Okay, make sure you're a resource. What would you like to have happen? Hold the space and honouring the emotions. I've got to press see more now. How do you need to be? Is it beneficial for them? Win place of love. Thank you for, that's really great that you're transcribing for me, Gia. That's great. Fabulous. Thank you for doing that. It's really, thanks for all the love you show me. So the first thing to do if you want to change the communications is do the setup process. What would I like to happen? How do I need to be? And what support do I need? Then I'm not sure whether you can see it from here. I might try and turn this around. But this is the model that I use. If I'm going to give feedback, if I'm going to be telling somebody what I think they should or shouldn't be doing, this is the model we follow when we run all of our power groups here, step-by-step listening. So the first thing I'd be doing, before I tell anybody what I think of them, I'd be actually asking them, I'll be chatting with them with purpose. So I'd be saying to them, I'd be listening to what's going on for them, find out what's happening in their world. One of the worst mistakes you can make in communication is you've got a burning desire to sort something out and you want to say it, but you haven't checked that the other person's ready to receive. So it's like checking in with them. They may have had the most horrendous piece of news, and you complaining or thinking they need to be more organised with their paperwork and their filing, in perspective to the fact that maybe someone in their life died, really isn't a big, it's not a big issue. And so the first thing to do if you want to give people feedback, there's 10 steps to the process, is chat with them, listen to them, listen without judgment, listen to be curious, find out what is happening for them. And then step 2 would be introduce and its outcomes. So it'd be, tell them you'd like to ask some questions. Tell them your intentions. Say that, I really want you to be happy. I really want you not to worry about being aggressive when you've got to complain about stuff. Whatever the thing is, tell them what you'd like to have happen. So it's really clear what the intention is behind what you're about to say. And then you can ask them, set up questions. You say, look, So I need to be able to tell you something that I'm afraid might upset you, but I really feel it would be helpful if I could share it with you. How can I set this up so it'll be okay for you? You may not use clean setup, I would, but I would say to them, look, I've got this thing to say. How do you need to be? Where do you need to be? When would be a good time to talk about it? So actually finding out and giving them opportunity to be in the right space to receive it. We do a 3-day workshop on how to give feedback to people and how to receive it. And people are often there because they're not very good at receiving feedback. And when they start sharing what they need, one of my team used to say to me, don't mind having feedback. Can you send it to me in writing first though? Because then I can read it, then I can digest it, I can get rid of all my emotional responses from it, and then we can have an adult conversation about it. But if you give it to me verbally only, I just end up with this emotional response, and then we don't really get to talk about it. But if that only happens because I say to them, I'd like to give some feedback, what works for you best, for you to receive my opinion, what would work for you. And the other thing to do is actually checking in with people about their strengths. Do you know what their strengths are? So for example, and I will show you a model in a minute called the Wealth Dynamics Business Development Tool, which is one of the things that really helps me to meet the person wherever they are. So for example, my husband, I'm on the Blaze energy, so I'm someone that always asks the who question. Who's this going to impact? Who's going to have to do it? And I always worry about whether the people are okay. It's no surprise I got into the work that I do. My husband's on the trader, on the tempo energy at the bottom of the profile, and he's an accumulator. Now, what he tends to ask is, when's it going to be done and how is it going to be done? But he's also someone that reflects a lot on, what could go wrong. So whenever I speak, he always tells me what could go wrong. And I could have considered him a really negative person, and in fact, if I'm really honest, when I first set in business, I used to think, oh, he never supports me, he always sort of looks on the negative, he's not very positive. But now that I understand that's his strength, that one of his strengths are he will do an analysis of what could go wrong, and because he's an accumulator, he reflects, he would have seen lots of patterns, and he only speaks when he really thinks there is a danger. So because I know his strengths, I don't try and correct him or tell him he shouldn't do it unless I'm in a position where it's really, really impacting my performance. So understanding your other person's strengths, understanding your strengths, understanding how those same strengths can be really annoying for other people at certain times means that you won't be giving feedback that undermines or underappreciates their strengths. And then we've got here on the agenda, it's a coffee break. But it's also about when you are giving feedback or you are telling people stuff, just be quiet for a moment. So I've been talking for a little while now, and I'm just going to take, 20 seconds, 30 seconds to be quiet. And just notice what happens to you physically. Just noticing in that time. So what often happens with feedback when we're trying to tell somebody what we think or what we feel is we speak very fast, and just by simply slowing down what you've got to say and allowing people time to digest, that can allow the information you've got to say to land effectively. Now, if you watch the videos about the reptilian brain, if you are worried about upsetting them, you are likely to be communicating from a place of fear. So you will probably speak very fast. And when we do this in the 3-day program, we experiment with people talking at different speeds, and then the people describe what that's like for them. So we'll go, that's like what? And they will say something like, I feel like it just stabbed me in the heart. So it's like, well, what you need to do is this. And it's like, what you need to do is, even though I would say telling someone what they need to do is, if you haven't listened to them, you don't know what they need to do, but you might want to say, what I'd really like to have happen is for you to be happy, and what I think would work is X, Y, and Z. But by taking it in the I pronoun, this is just my opinion of what I think would work for you, and I'd like to place it on the table between us, and would would that work for you? Just to give it as, it's like handing over the really gentle gift. And the way you say it, what pronouns you use, and the pace and the time you sort of stop in between the words just gives people time to process what it is you're saying. And so in answer to the question is how do you do it, is actually playing around with, being playful with the speed of what you're saying and what you're actually saying. So the next one on here is develop solutions, and this is really about, once you've done this with somebody and you know what their strengths are, you've checked that they're in the right place, I would firstly, before you give them their opinion, your opinion about anything, is ask them the question, what would you like to have happen? What's the solution that they want? And I can guarantee that if I wanted to give my husband feedback and said, I want you to be less negative and I want you to not keep telling me what I shouldn't do, I want you to tell me da-da-da, if I asked him what he would like to have happen, I'll almost guarantee that what he'll tell me is he'd like me to listen to him. So instead of criticising his criticising, just ask questions and be interested about it. Then the next thing is about evaluating and embedding learning. What happens if you've been doing those 6 steps, things have already started to change. So if you have started to listen more and you've told them your intention is that you really love them and you really care about them, maybe you won't say that at work, but you might say to your business associates, your staff or your clients or whatever, that what I want is for you to get a good result out of this partnership. What I want is for you to be happy at work, you know, whatever you might be saying. And so I just want you to think about that at that point, just stop and think about what's working, what do you know now about this other person, and what difference does knowing that make? You might ask them at that point. So I've been chatting for a little while, so what do you know now? What difference does knowing that make? And actually by checking in at that point, you might find they've already become self-aware of the thing that you wanted to give them advice about, and you now don't need to give them the feedback because they've learnt it for themselves. So you could ask them the question and you could check yourself. Notice the change and celebrate it. So you might say to them, you know, I'm really noticing you're a bit calmer now, or you're smiling, or, you know, and I really want to be able to help you to achieve that more often. Whatever the thing is that you're looking to help them with, it's about not making it all about you when you're communicating, but noticing what's happening for them and noticing what's happening for you. And once you've done that, then you can say to the person what you'd like to have happen for them and what you'd like to happen for yourself and what you'd like to happen for the relationship. And when you've done all that, that is usually the point when people will be ready to receive your feedback. It's at that point you might be able to give them some, you can actually give some feedback. And so it's really about asking more questions. So I think it was Malcolm who actually asked the questions, I've got them here, who asked the questions, how do I approach it when there might be a response like that you don't want, like a frying pan? Hopefully that, Malcolm, that helps you a little bit more there. I'm just going to bring it. Hello. And the other question we had was ways of giving the person the confidence that the fear is unrealistic. And I think that was yourself, Gavin. And so I just want to sort of really mention on this one is, first of all, it's an assumption that it's unrealistic because it's only from your map of the world. So the first thing is to do that process is chat with them. Say to them that, you know, that your intention is to help take away the fear, and you'd really like to help set them up for success. Ask those questions and meet them where, oh, pardon me, my orange juice is repeating on me. Ask them where they are. Follow that process all the way through. Focus on their strengths. Make sure you've got plenty of evidence, because you might think it's unrealistic, but maybe for them that is a potentially what could happen, and it may well be something that could happen to them because that's the energy that they're vibrating on. That's the communication they're giving out, so they're likely to get it back. And if you've got evidence that it doesn't happen, so if they're saying things like, "Oh, people don't like me. People are just going to laugh at me." But you have got actual evidence of when people have loved them and that people are in rapport with them or whatever. So get very specific. Make sure you've got, you know, information, names, places. Say, well, I heard and saw Cheryl say this is this about you. And from that, I know that she really likes you. So therefore, I've got lots of evidence that says otherwise. So you may need to give them evidence of the opposite. And so just saying that's not true or it's not really realistic often doesn't give them enough information to undo the evidence they've got already hooked into their system. Hi, Janine, thanks for joining us. So I think in answer to your questions, follow that process, Gavin, and then make sure that you are collecting evidence of it being unrealistic. But ultimately, the fear for them is realistic. It's real and it's true, and it's about honouring it and respecting it, and then saying to them, so, and what I would, if I've spent a lot of time asking those questions, I use Byron Katie's questions sometimes, which is not very clean, but I would perhaps sometimes just say to them, if they're saying, you know, everybody hates me, and I'll just, if it's something like a universal qualifier, like everybody does, or it never works, I'm never going to be able to do it, I might just say to them, is that true? But being quiet, without judgment. So they've got time to actually process that and actually acknowledge it for themselves. So hopefully that works for you. If not, you know, you're always welcome to get on the phone and talk about the individual case study if you want to change that relationship in some way or shape or form. Now, the other question I was given was, what would I say to a friend who worries about coming across aggressive? Well, I probably would ask more questions. Like, this is your question, Adrian, was that if I'd ask them for evidence, and I'm going to talk to you a bit more about this because it also answers the last question, and it's called drama-free feedback. I'd ask them, what do they hear and see that tells them that they're being aggressive? But I'd also ask them a question like, what happens just before you feel aggressive? And it's probably more about setting them up for success. So if they don't want to be aggressive, the thing to find out is, what would they like to be instead? It is about asking questions that help them change their focus from the aggressive to the solution that they want. So that's where we become sort of strength and solution focused. So I would be asking questions if they're actually saying, you know, I don't want to talk because people think I'm aggressive. I might ask, so what would they hear and see that would say you're being aggressive? Where they go, well, because I talk really loud, or I talk really fast, or he might not know, and he might need that feedback specifically to say, this is the behaviour that I'm seeing, and this is what's getting interpreted as aggressive. Might want to find out what the triggers are before. So what is it that triggers that? What happens just before aggressive? And he might find he gets nervous, or he's been talking and talking, but people don't listen to him. So then he gets really fed up. One of the things that happens with me is I either talk faster or I talk louder. And usually that happens when I haven't been getting some response from somebody, that they're actually hearing me and that they understand me. And because I know I do it now, I can kind of measure it and realise I catch myself getting louder and I just slow myself down. So the short answer with you for Adrian isn't really a short answer, is find out what's happening, what he thinks it is that demonstrates aggression. Find out what the trigger is, what happens just before. Ask him when it's like that, what would he like to have happen? And if he says, well, I'd like to be able to talk calmer, I'd like to be able to talk in a way that doesn't frighten people, then I would ask him to start noticing times when he is able to talk calmly and he doesn't frighten people, so that he puts all of his attention on collecting the evidence of what works and what happens just before that's happening. Because he will have times when he feels able to speak and it doesn't happen. And it's always about developing the strength that, you know, a situation when it does work for that person. And I hope that helps, but I think this other model will also help, which is the drama-free model, which is actually, if you've got the book, guys, it's on page 167 in the workbook. But the last question was a way to be tactful when pointing out faults. So if I just quickly switch the camera again, sorry for keep. But this is can you see this? I don't think you can. Oh, well, you probably can. It's me. I've got my glasses on and it's all fuzzy for me. Let me just show you. So drama-free feedback is this is the model from Caitlin Walker, is if someone says to me, oh, you're really good, or they say, you know, you really annoy me, but just telling me that I'm good or I'm annoying doesn't help me know specifically what behaviour you saw that you interpret as being annoying or good. So like if someone says they're aggressive, I'd say, so what did you hear and see that tells you I'm aggressive? And they might go, well, your voice gets louder, or your body language is, or the fact you've got fists, you're shaking your fists or pointing your finger, or whatever they're actually specifically seeing. And then the next bit is, what do you infer from that? And the reason this is, the whole thing our brain is always doing is making sense of stuff based on patterns. So the fact that, so if someone sees a hand shaking or a fist or a raised voice, past experience is telling them that that means someone's aggressive, okay, or they're defensive, whatever the story. So we all do this. This is just a human nature. When you see or hear a behaviour, you will be making an interpretation from that. So you will be, and I always say to people, so what's the story that you're telling yourself to make sense of it? So when somebody's doing this, they're depressed or whatever, you might have a story you tell yourself, whereas I might look at them and go, oh, well, they're just thinking, or they're sleeping, or they're resting, and each one of us has our own interpretation. So the first thing is, if we're going to give something a label, and I have an expression, I say to people, give me a label by all means, put me in a box if you need to make sense of something, but don't put the lid on, because it doesn't give me the opportunity to grow. And it's only when you ask questions you can understand what it's like for me in comparison to your interpretation of it. So first thing is, what did you actually hear and see that tells you they're aggressive? What did you hear and see that says you're not going to get the right response you want? What do you hear and say that says that the fear is unrealistic? So you see and hear this, and you infer from that. So the story you tell yourself to make sense of it is whatever. And what you're doing by doing this process is you're separating out the fact from the story. You're separating out the logical side of it, so your left-hand side of your brain from your emotional side of your brain. So you're getting the facts separated from the emotion. So let's take the aging bond. I don't know what aggression looks like, but I'm going to use that as an example. So if what you hear and see is someone go, oh, I'm really fed up like this, and what you hear and you infer from that is they're aggressive, the next part of the model on the book says, what's the impact on you? So for me, if someone does that and they shout at me really loud, the impact on me is I kind of freeze and I withdraw and I go into flight, fight or freeze, and I don't really listen. All I want to do is get away from it all. It frightens me. And then the last part of the model is, so when that's the impact, what would you like to have happen? So let's say if you were taking this as an example with your friend, you might go up to them and say, look, when you're talking to me, I hear that you're really worried about communicating with people because you're afraid you're going to become aggressive. So what I hear and see is you not speaking up, not telling people how you really feel, not getting heard. So I infer from that it means that your relationships aren't going to work. And the impact on me is then I worry about you and I think, how can I best support you? And what I'd like to have happen is to be able to talk this through with you and find a way that I could support you so that you could communicate without being aggressive. Well, that's what I would like to have happen, and that's usually how I finish. That's what I would like to have happen. What would you like to have happen? And then that's when you have to be quiet. You have to just listen to find out what they want, because you've got it off your chest what you want. So I think, Trevor, you asked about the tactful points for faults and criticism. It's making sure, first of all, you've had a relationship with that person, that you have spent some time telling them what you value about them. Do you know their strengths? Are you aware of how those strengths can show up as a challenge for other people? Or are you just criticising them? And if you are just criticising them, then I would say think twice about it, because you never know where that person is. One of the things I found on my journey was that people would criticise me because I came across as really, really confident. So I'd go networking. It doesn't affect me now, but it used to be. People would go, oh, Cheryl talks a lot. She's her company's called Step by Step Listening, and then she never listens. All she ever does is talk. And people assumed that I was in a really confident place, but they had no idea what was going on home for me. And so when you at home every day, your 16-year-old daughter's telling you they hate you and that you never listen, and all you're ever trying to do, and all you spend your life spending 8 hours a day. So in a minute I'm going to start a power group, and I will spend from 9:30 to 5:30 listening to other people. I might talk for about a couple of minutes in the coffee breaks or lunch break, but generally speaking, I'm in listening mode. My opinion isn't asked for. I'm not giving my opinion. I'm not giving any advice. I'm literally listening and supporting other people. And I can do that for 2 or 3 whole days a week. And so when you know that's not who you are, but other people do that, and they have no idea where you're at in your life, that criticism can be what you hit people without having any concept of where they are in their life right now. So the most important thing about giving criticism is check your relationship with them. Have you earned that place to do so, or are you just doing that because it'll make you feel better? So don't throw your stuff on people without checking where they're at and whether feedback for them is really useful. Sophia Pacifico Reese is one of my clients from ages ago now. We don't necessarily work directly together now, but she is a lady who loves feedback. So she can lap it up. So if people are asking you for it, by all means give it to them, but give it to them balanced. Make sure you're telling them what works, what doesn't work, and what needs to work better. And own the fact it's only for you from your map of the world. It doesn't mean it wouldn't work for other people. So one of the things I wanted to share with you, and I'm running out of time now, it's past. I'm going to give you a quick flash of it on here, and then I'm going to this next Friday. But one of the models that I use, which is this one here, which is the Wealth Dynamics tool, because this is a good way of finding out where your strengths are. So people at the dynamo at the top are really big picture people. So they come up with loads of ideas. They like solving problems. People on the right, the blaze energy, they love helping people. They like motivating people. That's where my energy is. People down the bottom tempo, they like to serve. They like to deliver stuff. They need to know what's got to be done and when's it got to be done. And they'll get it done for you, and still like to reflect, analyse data, and look at how you can actually streamline and organise systems. I'm going to talk more about this next week, because I think one of the most important criticism, whether it's criticising yourself or other people, is knowing, really, the sun's really coming in now, isn't it? Is that know what your strengths are, and truly value, truly own them. But then when you fully understand when those same strengths are going to annoy people. So for me, my process is to actually be on the is all about people, but it annoys people who are very profit orientated, very number orientated, because I sound like I'm never talking about the numbers, and actually I need people who do the numbers in order to balance my system out. And likewise, people who are very good at analysing and numbers tend to work with me because they want to have the words and the language to help them with people. But if you don't understand where you are at the moment, you don't know what your strengths are, then it can be really difficult. So I'm going to pop a link below, which is with the Wealth Dynamics link on it. And if you want to look at that, read it. If you've got the book, you can obviously, there's a little section about it in there as well. And if you've got any questions about Wealth Dynamics, I think Susie just put down that she loves Wealth Dynamics, helps me to understand how I work at my best. Susie's a great example. She really, really was convinced when I did her profile that her husband would be an accumulator, because he would say what could go wrong. He was doing this evaluation, and actually what it turned out to be is they were both creators, but one's an introverted creator and one's an extroverted creator, and I work with them in their team to create the energy down the lower end, and they have other people that do the technical side of stuff. So once you know where your energies are and where your strengths are, you know who to go to get your feedback from. But if you understand where your feedback is coming from, and you understand other people's energies and where their strengths are, you'll also be more selective about what feedback you give them. And it can just help balance that whole system out. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I've waffled a little bit at the end there. That's because I just want to tell you more about stuff, and I want you to have all the help you could have right now. But I will bring Wealth Dynamics to the table, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next Friday. Hope that's been useful. Please share below your learnings. If you've got anything from today, you do anything different, let me know. And have a fantastic weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next week, and it'll be March. Oh my gosh, we're almost in the last month of the first quarter. I hope everything's going as well as you'd like it to this year, and if not, you know where I am. I'm here to support you and be your cheerleader and your strength and solution detective. Speak to you soon, guys.